I would say. I think it's just the way the industry is evolving to a more artist centric, um, career industry, if you want to call it that. Prior to that, it was mostly the gallery scene, or art dealers, which are also art galleries, but on a smaller scale. Making connections for the artists and managing their careers, the same way that celebrities have. Actors, musicians, they all have managers that help them promote and schedule things and all that stuff. So, it's common in other industries. It's just beginning to change now, and it began with visual art, but it's starting to move into performance art as well. Musicians are now starting to take care of their own. If you look at Taylor Swift, her manager is her dad. So that unit is very tightly knit, but it's not traditional. That's not the norm. Usually, you have to go get a manager or a dealer or somebody that represents you to help manage things. So it's changed now mostly because of technology, right? So you can show your artwork online without needing to go to a gallery. 30 years ago, that wasn't really possible. Yeah. So um, what we're going to be doing is covering some information and some training about selling your work, how to go about doing it, what you need to know. So let's kind of dive in here. This is my background information. I don't know if you guys care to know, but that's me. That's a JC Penney, one of those JC Penney photos that you would go in and take. So don't trust what you see. I wasn't a young artist, although that looks pretty rad. Um, I didn't become an artist until I was in my late 20s. So I owned an art gallery from 2011 till 2019. Showed many artists, had many art shows. Really great, memorable time. Taught me a lot of lessons. I began my career as an artist in 2012. So not long after I opened the gallery, I began my own art career. I'm also a certified business advisor with the SBA, the Small Business Administration. I worked for them for about 4 years, helping a lot of different businesses with their business plans and marketing and selling and all this other stuff. And then I established Art Alliance of San Angelo in 2022 officially. So we're going on 2 years. Woohoo! And our mission is just to help educate, inform, and connect our local artists in order for them to do what they do, which is make great art. So there are three rules that I've learned when I began approaching the selling of my artwork. But before we get into that, I wanted to talk a little bit about why do artists struggle to sell their art. We touched on that a little bit, but I really feel like it's a good idea to talk a little bit more in depth and just validate some feelings that I think people have about selling, and I think it's just better to get that out of the way and just be honest about it. Um, Selling isn't fun for artists, and I would say some artists enjoy it, but most don't. That's just my experience and what I've read a lot of and seen a lot of in real life and online. And they struggle, I think, mostly because artists are introverts, right? Where most of us would rather just be at home with our cats and making art and enjoying our lives without having to interact with people, because people are confusing. They're unpredictable. And so that's, the selling process can make that very challenging and anxiety inducing. So the other struggle has to do with the knowledge and education part of it, like we talked about a minute ago. It's just not a normal thing. That's a course. If you had a major at college for a BFA, and one of the courses was going to be selling. Um, I don't think that would think that would come as a shock if people saw that in the curriculum, but it needs to be in there because it's so important. It really does set up um, you as an entrepreneur artist to take control of your career and be able to execute on the decisions you want to make, especially when it comes to generating revenue. Because when you're in business, that's the thing that you have to be focused on, and it's not so easy. You have to have some good training and some good knowledge, Um, and I think that a lot of artists are also still coming around to the idea of using the internet to sell their work, which is really it's really effective if you know what you're doing, and you like and you enjoy it. But I just get the idea that many artists don't enjoy the online space, and if that's the case, then it is going to be very difficult to sell your artwork online and in person if you're uncomfortable. But if at the very least, I hope that you walk out of this particular virtually walk out, not literally walk out, at the end of this, uh, walk out feeling like you have a little bit more to go off of, things that you didn't know before, and nobody really told you or cared to train you on. So that's what this is for, and we're going to dive right in, um, now that we have a little bit of context around why it's so challenging. So these are three rules that I was given, by a mentor of mine. She goes by the name of Lori Justice Pace. She's a wonderful artist out of Dallas, very vibrant, equestrian paintings. And she told me these three rules. In any situation where somebody's going to buy art, these three rules apply. And you must meet these three rules. Somebody must meet these rules in order to purchase your work, right? So you can actually facilitate, um, this by following these rules and prepping your art, at least after you're done making it. So, rule number one: buyers must love or like your artwork. There are some outliers for sure in terms of who, um, who it is and what the situation is. But I would say that for the most part, if anybody's going to buy your work, they have to like it or love it. Um, which means, we'll actually get into that in a bit. Rule number two is buyers must have space for your art. So they have to have space in their home or their office. And rule number three, buyers must be able to afford your art. That's an important one. They can't buy it if they can't afford it. So why don't we dive a little bit deeper into each one? So rule number one, you have to create with sincerity. You can't try to make somebody love or like your art, or try to figure out what they already like or love and then work your way backwards from that. It can work sometimes, but most of the time you're going to spinning your wheels, wasting time and energy and money trying to do that. It's better if you approach it by just creating what you love, what you like. And that really is the best way for you to find your lifelong, um, supporters, patrons, buyers, collectors, whatever you want to call it. The sincerity through which you paint and create is what's going to help sell your work. Um, I know artists that do it another way by looking at trends, and I just don't like that. I've done it. I didn't like it. It made me disgusted with my art, and I would never advocate for that. But if that's what you do, that's what you do. I'm not going to judge you. I just didn't like it myself. So create with sincerity. That's my mantra. Focus on the journey, not the result. Again, if you are a perfectionist and you just want to make sure that your art is up to your standards, that's great. But if you think it's going to be that every piece of work is going to be your best work, it's not. The best that you can do is just to focus on making. The process of making will teach you a lot about yourself and a lot about your creative process. And that's going to translate to the people that look at your work. They want to get the sense that you're confident in what you're making. And that actually does come across in artwork when you look at it. You can tell when the artist is not confident, when colors get muddy, or there's anxiety in the painting, overworking an area. I think all of that comes, because you're not thinking of the process. You're thinking of the result and what it's going to look like, or what you think you want it to look like. You really can't do that. Um, Planning is okay, but there's a difference between planning and then having unrealistic expectations for you. So just enjoy the journey, and it will come across like you actually enjoy making what you make, and that translates to somebody looking at it as having a better chance of liking it, or loving it. So focus on telling the story. This is something that I think a lot of artists don't do. I've been at fault for this, but I've tried to do better, which is telling the story around why you make your artwork, or even the artwork itself has to have something for people to process. It can't just be the art itself. And I realize some people were like, well, the art should be able to stand on its own. I'm like, yeah, but in this day and age, people have such short attention spans that they may not get it right away. So think about how you tell that story. It's told through the title of your artwork, you know, it's told by you, the artist, in your artist statement, as well as your ability to communicate that in person. Or if you're writing a description for it on a post on social media, or you're listing it on your website, like tell the story of your artwork, how it came to be, why it came to be, why you needed to paint it. And I think that that will be communicated when people start to engage with your art. And that really does help people develop a likeness or a love for it. Um, and the last thing is strive for professionalism. And the reason I say that is because, you know, the quality of your artwork doesn't end with the last stroke of your paintbrush on the front side of the canvas or whatever you're painting on. It translates to how you finish edges. It translates to you signing your work. It translates to you having hanging wire on the back already. It translates to um, varnish if you decide to varnish your work. So you can see there's a lot of things you could do to increase the professionalism of your art, which makes it much easier to like and love because people will go down that path of trying to commodify your artwork. And that sucks because it shouldn't happen. But some people do that because they don't know not to. And so they'll look at little details and you don't know what could be the thing that drives people away. But, you know, being professional never hurts. You're not pretending to be anything else except really good at what you do. And so I always try to recommend people to think about that as after they've created their work. What else? What would elevate it, you know, beyond the creativity? What would elevate the work even more? So that's how I approach rule one. So rule two, um, the size of your work is always going to have an impact on whether somebody can get it or not. You know, they probably can picture their home really easily and know where it's not going to fit and where it's going to fit. And most people walk in with that sort of ability. And so think about that in terms of when you're making your work. Don't be afraid to go big and don't be afraid to go small, because the more range you have in the sizes that you create, the more opportunities you have in order for it to reach the right person. Obviously, there's a lot to go with that in terms of, like, you know, creating bigger work. You know, the space that you have, you know, to store, to work on it may limit you, but I wouldn't be afraid of testing those limits and just trying to see what you can come up with at different scale. Prints are going to meet a lot of needs, and they're the easiest thing for you to produce once it's all set up and sell. It's the kind of thing that makes money while you're asleep, right? You still have to get it out the door, don't get me wrong. It just doesn't take as long as you making one piece of artwork. And so that's kind of residual. And so having prints available of a work, you know, maybe you have an original that's like a 48 by 48, and you know, somebody likes it but it's too big. If you have small prints available, then you're probably going to close that sale, probably. And so just make sure that you're thinking about the different various print formats, because they can range in prices, whether you're talking about stretched canvas or a flat print with different, you know, types of material. You know, that's going to impact, again, how much they like it or love it. You know, the quality, of course, is going to impact that, and as well as the price, which we talked about in our previous webinar. So show your art at scale. This is important as well, because they have to get a sense of how big it is. This is really more important in terms of, you know, online. You know, if you have a big painting, you know, then you should try to find a way to display that in a photo that it shows its scale. So something like, you know, a table or a chair, you know, or a desk, you know, or a plant, and have that next to your work so that it gives it a sense of scale so people can make a decision on what they want. Okay. So The last thing is give as much information as possible. Um, you want to make sure that the person that's looking at your artwork has all the information they can go off of. And on in person, this is mostly just displaying on the label, the medium, the size, um, what the materials are. If you paint it on wood versus metal or canvas. Uh, but when you are in person and people start to ask you questions, it's good to give up additional information so that you can give them what they need. And in terms of making a decision, right? Online, that actually does translate more to providing more context of the painting. Remember, we talked about telling the story, as well as talking about shipping. Um, what are some things for them to be aware of in terms of the artwork itself, and that is it framed? Is it not framed? Is it come already ready to hang? Does it have a certificate of authenticity? Those are all things that you need to include with the information. So again, that helps them on the size, with the size area. Adding that additional information really does help them in making that decision. So, rule number 3, and this really has a lot to do with being sensitive to the folks that are in your area. We talked about this in the pricing webinar. So if you go to our YouTube channel, which you're probably on, and look up our previous webinar pricing, the price sensitivity is something we talked about. And just a quick recap, your area and where you live may be most likely the place you sell most to. So you want to be careful to not overprice your artwork based on the price sensitivity of your area. So you may have a high price sensitivity like our area here. We're very sensitive to changes in prices because this is a blue collar, rural West Texas town. Most people here are not white collared workers. The majority are blue collared. And so you have to think about that when you're presenting your art, and the prices. A city with low sensitivity is like Dallas because there's so many people there, and they're used to paying a lot of money for different things. And there are more people that are wealthy there, so per capita. So you're seeing the price sensitivity relatively low in big cities. So thinking about that, the price sensitivity of your area and how you decide to price your work according to the materials, whether it's a print or a small original piece, is important because you will find out that you could be sitting for a very long time with artwork that won't sell for a bit. And in other circumstances, you may sell it very quickly because you priced it just right. Just keep in mind that you never want to lose money on a price. So make sure that you work in some profit there. Not all buyers are meant for you. This is something that I think that a lot of people talk about, but not as frequent, which is the fact that your buyers are um, going to be able to buy from you, and ones that you just can't help. Like I said, if you want to make sure that in your price you have profit, but even in that circumstance, and you've accounted for the price sensitivity, you've accounted for the size and all that stuff, and that still doesn't meet their needs, then it's unfortunate that they can't afford it. But there's nothing else that you can do except give it away, and that's totally up to that's totally up to you if you want to do that. You don't have to do that, and you shouldn't. But that's the reality. So not all buyers are meant for you. Um, it doesn't mean that they won't eventually become a buyer. It just means that they won't be able to do it now. All right. Stickers gets your foot in the door. When we're talking about affordability, there's probably not much that I can think of right now except postcards, but stickers really do beat out a lot of stickers and pins, I would say, but more stickers than anything else. Beats out a lot of out of the reason of for not somebody not to be able to buy your work. A sticker, from what I've seen, is around $3 to $5 for a sticker, depending on the quality and the size. But they're affordable to produce. They have a pretty good margin on them. Some stickers are only a few cents per sticker, so you're able to bake in a really good profit margin. You just have to sell more of them in order to make a profit. But they're great because um, they can open up a dialogue and a relationship with somebody that has a piece of your work, even if it is a small, 2-inch or 3-inch sticker. So keep that in mind. Stickers are a great way for you to help with this particular rule when it comes to people not being able to afford. But again, it's still you still have to work in profit. You can't give away stickers unless you really want to. It's up to you. And then finally, you want to ask questions. And this kind of is going to segue into our next part in terms of selling. But you really need to ask questions about, what limitations they're running into. If they are having trouble, you know, trying to picture the space that they're in and they're just unsure, ask them to send you a picture of it and then get an app that allows you to superimpose your painting in there. One great app is artplacer.com. That technology that website has is incredible. You can load in a picture, that somebody sent you or that you took with a wall that's blank, and you can insert your painting, your digital photograph of your painting into that scene and send it to them. And it does wonders for this particular area. But at the end of the day, you want to make sure that you're asking good questions about what their limitations are. If it's about price, you just want to be upfront and saying, well, this is what I have. You don't want to twist their arm. You just want to find out what problems they have and whether or not you can help them. That's really what it comes down to. All right. And that's a good segue into this next topic, which is the last topic. Again, this is not going to be a long webinar. Selling in person is such a huge obstacle for a lot of artists, and they get tripped up. And I've seen many artists lose sales because they are not properly prepared for dealing with somebody in person. And this is more prevalent when it comes to selling at an event, like like a conference or convention, having a booth. Maybe you're at an art show and somebody happens to ask you about your artwork. So the first thing that we want to talk about here is we want to make sure that I want you to understand that selling in person is not like selling cars. You're not a car salesman. This is all about making sure that you can uncover as much as possible to help your customer get what they need. And that's it. You just want to help them make that, easier, make that process much smoother and easier for them. So the first thing you want to do is establish some sort of rapport. Second is you want to listen. That means you can't talk. You can ask questions, but other than that, you shouldn't be providing much else unless they ask you. Confirm their needs, and then present your solution. So let's talk about each one in depth. So when we talk about rapport, what is rapport? Rapport is the ability to, not the ability, it's the action of creating some warmth and familiarity and friendship, at the beginning of your communication. And that's difficult for people, I think, especially artists, because most of them are introverts. So it's difficult to pretend and mask that hard, to try to just, have some sort of, ability to charm them out the gate. But you don't have to charm them. You just need to be interested in them as a human being. And if we think of it that way, it actually makes it so much easier to do that because your art is doing that for you as well. You're just trying to make that connection a little deeper. And that's what rapport is for when you're just getting to know somebody that's maybe looking at your artwork. So an icebreaker is something very simple that you can come up to them and start the conversation. I would just lead in with, I noticed you're checking out the painting. Like, do you have a favorite that you've seen so far? Or, I noticed you were looking at my artwork. This particular piece is blah, 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 blah. I just thought that'd be interesting for you to know. Like, just little tidbits like that. It doesn't have to be like, some weird rehearsed line that seems insincere. It's just genuinely in the moment with them and trying to express something to them during that moment. because they're not going to be in that moment with you for long. They're going to walk out way or move on to something else. So you would take advantage of the moment and what's happening in that moment. They're looking at the art. Maybe they want to know something interesting, or maybe you're present with them and you like something that they have on. Maybe you want to give them a compliment. Just be genuine, whatever the icebreaker is. Next, you want to be curious about them. And this is really where I think there are nuances with building relationships with people, um, where you think that maybe you need to be talking about yourself and you shouldn't. Don't start babbling on about who you are and what you've done. Ask them who they are and where they've been and what they like. And like, don't go, don't do it like a machine gun, like spit out the questions like that, but pick one. And then be curious about what it is that they're telling you and maybe follow up with a few other questions out of curiosity. But do not sell them anything. People really don't like being sold. And although this is sales training, it should be known that you're not going to get very far if you try to close the deal immediately. It's not a great way to approach people. You will lose more people than you get. So just be aware of that. So don't sell them anything. Just be genuine. Want to get to know them. Once you start asking them questions, and it's good that you ask them open-ended questions. A closed-ended question is something like, a yes or no answer. Like, you know, do you like this painting? Yes, that's a yes or no. Or rather, an open-ended question is, what do you like about this painting? Is not an open-ended question. They actually have to talk. And once they do, you can't interrupt. Don't interrupt. Um, Take mental notes. You know, keep track of things that they've said. Maybe they made they have a change that they just went through. Maybe they just moved here, or maybe they just had a birthday, or maybe they're planning a trip, or maybe they just got back from a long trip. Like take mental notes because those things are going to be important for you as you move forward and into this conversation with them. And then you also want to look for nonverbal cues in person. Obviously, that's easier. You can't do that online, which is why doing this in person is so much more effective. But you can look for nonverbal cues. If they are making gestures with their hands toward the painting, if they are constantly looking at the painting, if their feet are pointed towards the painting, it's probably because they have an interest in the painting, and you need to make sure that you acknowledge that mentally and cue that up. But if they look like they're trying to get out of the conversation because they're uncomfortable and they're giving you very short answers, maybe they're just not interested in talking. And at that point, you just leave them alone. But if they are giving you more information about, what their intentions are with their hands or their facial expressions, if they're excited, those are all good, nonverbal cues for you to take in consideration as that this person might be interested in your artwork and you should continue that conversation with them. Next, you want to confirm their needs. Repeat to them what they are looking for and be specific. Whenever the conversation starts to kind of circle back to why they're there, I mean, they're looking at your artwork, you could circle back with some of the things that some of the information they've given you and help tie that in for them because they may not realize it. If they just said, we just got back from a long trip, and we're just getting settled back in, you might tie that in and say, where was your trip to? Was it was it the West Coast that you said? I have a painting that actually I did of the West Coast, and there's the sea. Like you have to be able to listen for cues that ties in with things that you are aware of, that they may not be aware of, and that's why you ask questions at the beginning so that you can listen and take that in, and then be specific because it'll help them make that determination much more easier. You're helping them make that decision basically, and then you want to ask for clarity. Like maybe. Maybe you're a little unclear about why, they're looking for artwork in the first place. Maybe you're unclear about where it's supposed to be going or, what space they're thinking about. Like ask more questions and ask for clarity about that and be concise. You don't want to ramble on with your own stories. And, you just want to confirm with them that this is what they're looking for based on what the conversation's been. And and that's a good thing because you want to help them determine whether or not they're interested or not. Some of them are very sure and some of them are unsure. And for the ones that are unsure, you need to help them. Okay, so be concise with your answers. Present your solution. Again, we just talked about why it's so important for you to uh, think about what it is that they're looking for once you've confirmed and gotten clarity and all that stuff. It's really important for you to tie in the things that they've told you and you've confirmed with the things that they're looking at in your artwork. And you may be able to bring out things that they didn't know about it that you can actually pull together. Like you could talk about the idea that you painted, this picture of Greece because it was a picture that you took while you were there. And that may tie in some of the feelings they have about their trip that they just came back from. And so, those are just little things that you can do in order to help them see the connection. Um, the other thing I would say is handling rejection, which is difficult for a lot of people. Um, probably the least fun and the hardest thing to probably do is hear somebody say um, that they don't think the art is for them. But you have to be careful because sometimes they'll say something that's a misunderstanding and you have to clarify that. So, if they think they're looking at the painting and they're like, oh, I just can't fit a 24 by 24, you know, and they're just glancing at it, they're not really looking at the label or anything. You have to clarify that it's a misunderstanding. You have to say, well, no, that's a 16 by 16. Um, or if maybe they have some doubt about, I don't know if it'll fit in there. It seems like it'd be a tight fit. And then you can say something like, well, I can understand, we definitely don't want you to, make a commitment to this and then figure out it doesn't fit where you want to, but I'd be happy to, you know, come out and help install it for you to figure that out. And if it doesn't work for you, I can find a smaller size for you in a print format. How does that sound? So, that's a way for you to be able to help them with that particular problem if they're having some doubt or misunderstanding. Um, and in some cases, you just have to be very aware of some of those cues of, they don't seem very engaged in the conversation. Um, and they just don't, they're just not interested in your offer. And at that point, you say, well, great. Let me know if there's anything you need. Um, please check out my social media. Be happy to share my story with you, and that's it. You walk away from that, and don't linger on that experience. Just know that that it wasn't for that person, and better you find out quicker than later, and wasting your time. You know what I mean? Because some people will do that. Some people that don't want to buy from you if you're at a very busy event don't really have any interest in buying anything. And at that point, if you're there on business, you really do have to kind of help end that conversation in a very polite way. And you go just say, oh, after you've asked them, is this something that you might be interested in purchasing? No, not right now. Okay, well, hey, you don't want to take any more of your time. It was great visiting with you. Let me know if you have any questions. That's it. Get out of there and give your time to somebody that might be interested in buying your work. Again, this is for in-person stuff. Online, this is very different. Um, the last thing is, once you've had this conversation, you've determined a lot of things, you understand that they're interested. There's no real, easy way to tell you that you just have to ask for the sale. You have to ask them if they're ready to buy. And I know that sounds uncomfortable, and many of you probably won't want to do that. But in all reality, the person is waiting for you to do that. You know, some people just want to be asked. After you've done all that communicating, some people just want to be asked. Some people want to give you their card if you ask for it, their payment information. But once you do that and the sale begins, you have to stop talking. It's the biggest thing that I've seen that artists tend to do is they talk themselves out of the sale. This one time, I saw an artist that was trying to close a sale, and they had the credit card in their hand. And then they went on talking about a story that was like 10 minutes long. And then the person said, "I'm so sorry, I have to get going because my children or whatever." And they grabbed the card out of the artist's hand and they walked away very quickly because they were in a hurry. And the artist was just sitting there, like completely caught off guard and deflated because they were so sure they were getting the sale, a good sale too. And there's nothing else you can do. I mean, you can try to chase after the person, but if you didn't get their information or nothing, then that's it's unfortunate that you lose that sale. So when you start that process with somebody and you're ready to ask for the sale, you have to just ask them, "Are you ready? Are you ready to buy it? If you are, I can help you right over here." You start writing out the receipt for them, you know, doing all that stuff, getting it ready to go, and be done with it. Try not to keep the conversation going unless it's very, very light conversation. Otherwise, just shut up. And once you're done collecting the sale, then you can continue on if you'd like. How to not lose a sale. So, in closing the sale, like we just talked about, it's really important that you focus on the transaction. The transaction is going to be making sure that you're charging the right amount, that you're giving them a receipt, that you are packaging the artwork for them. Um, Tell your story after that sale is done, but ask for their address and their email. They are collectors now, and it's really important that you understand that the selling of your artwork is a lot easier when you have a list of people that have already bought your work. Those are called collectors. And if you don't have their information, then selling is going to be a very hard battle for you. And it's difficult if you're not selling to people that already love your work. So once you finish the sale, ask for their information and ask if you have permission to send them emails and updates and reach out to them, send them a card every once in a while. Ask them for permission and then start making a list, of those people and their information and protect it, of course. Don't keep it written on a piece of paper and leave it around anywhere. Keep it on file, back it up on your computer. It's really, really important. It's your bread and butter. And then finally, if you feel comfortable enough and you feel like you've developed a good enough rapport with them, ask them for a referral, or better yet, a review. If you have, hopefully you have a Google listing. If you do, send them there because that's the best place for SEO. Facebook's great, but in my opinion, Google reviews are better. So if you're also comfortable to ask them for business and say, "Hey, do you know anybody else that likes this kind of artwork? Would you mind referring them, sometime down the road?" You got to be tactful about that because asking for business can sound a little icky. So try to phrase it in a way that feels natural and I would encourage you to ask people that you definitely have a rapport with. People that you don't have a rapport with, it might come across as a little pushy. So just keep that in consideration. All right. That's really it. I wanted to keep this short and sweet so that you guys can move on with your day and get the information you needed. Um, Here are some recommended resources for y'all. There's a great book that I love called Selling the Invisible by Harry Beckwith. Selling the invisible is selling things that are not tangible, like classes and subscriptions and stuff like that. But there's a lot of great insight into that, and I think there's some parallels there with art. Art isn't tangible per se in terms of the emotional part. The physical part is obviously, but there are some correlations there. I think that's important. Art Placer, we talked about mocking up some of those images for scale so that you could make sure that somebody can realize how big or small your artwork is. And then the podcast that we have, which is we try to keep up with the latest interview with a local artist here in San Angelo, Inks, is on the podcast. It's really, really great. He talks about his journey and his creative process, and it's all great. So please check it out. It's on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And a book that I would recommend right now, I'm reading The Profitable Artist. It's published by the New York Arts Foundation, and it's really good. I have several art business books, but this one is really, it does cover a lot of great detail. and good information, and it's recently been updated. So highly recommend that. And another book that I really like is Find Your Artistic Voice by Lisa Congdon. She is a art book author. She's released several books. This one I really like because it does focus on your creative process, which is really important when it comes to selling. You know, if you are focused on trying to just make the sale, you know, before you've made your art, I think you're going to fail at that. Ultimately, it doesn't last very long. But she does talk about how to develop and trust your artistic voice. And it's a great book. I really enjoyed it. Lots of good stories in there. So you can find the Art Alliance online. We've got new members. In fact, we just got the Arts Council of Brownwood. They are a new partner member. They just joined. We also got some new members that are joining up as well. Join our Facebook group because that's where we put out all our information. So you just go to the Art Alliance San Angelo Facebook group, ask for permission. You have to or you have to answer a question there to join the group because it is private. And then just want to talk about some goals for the future is more of these mini workshops, you know, webinars or whatnot done on our YouTube channel because it's free and, you know, it's always going to be there. So it's a great place to have it. And more collaborations. We have our next artist mixer on April 4th at the Chicken Farm Arts Center inside the Trace Do Studio with Keith Stinnett and his family. That's going to be from 5:30 to 7 p.m. on the 4th of April, 2024, which is coming up real soon. And the last one was a big hit. It was over at Donata Gallery and Boutique on Beauregard, and it was fantastic. It was so much fun catching up with all the artists, but this is going to be fun too. We look forward to that. So more collaborations to come. And if you have any suggestions about what kind of workshops you'd like to see, please email us, please contact us, you know, shoot us a message, leave a comment, and yeah, we'd love to consider those for the future. So that is it. I'm going to end things there, and hopefully this will